Welcome to Dreamtale Sleep Stories. Tonight's reading is The Borrowed Eyes. Settle into your bed or sofa and let your shoulders, jaw, and eyelids grow heavy. Inhale slowly, 1, 2, 3, and sigh the air away, allowing the day to fade into quiet dark. With every soft inhale, you invite fresh English phrases. With every gentle exhale, stray thoughts drift farther off. Behind my voice flows a gentle 528 Hz melody, renowned for guiding the mind toward deep relaxation. Keep your eyes closed or follow the captions, whichever feels right. Simply receive the rhythm and resonance of the language. Deep in rest, tonight's phrases will take root like seeds, ready to bloom into stronger English skills with the morning light. When you feel settled, hold that unhurried breath and allow yourself to drift into the tale. The Borrowed Eyes begins now, and when the story's final line has faded, the music will linger a little longer, carrying you gently deeper into sleep. The Borrowed Eyes. Mika had been blind since birth, living in a world of sounds, textures, and scents that others often overlooked. At 17, she navigated her life with remarkable grace, using her white cane and heightened senses to move through the bustling streets of Tokyo. Her parents worried constantly, but Mika insisted on maintaining her independence, attending a regular high school and refusing to let her disability define her limitations. One ordinary Tuesday morning, something extraordinary happened. Mika was sitting in her classroom, listening to her teacher explain a complex mathematical equation, when suddenly she could see, not through her own eyes, which remained as sightless as ever, but through someone else's vision. She saw the whiteboard, covered in numbers and symbols, viewed from a seat 3 rows ahead of her. The perspective belonged to her classmate, Takeshi, and somehow she was seeing exactly what he saw. The vision lasted only a few seconds before fading back to darkness, leaving Mika breathless and confused. She gripped her desk, her heart racing as she tried to process what had just occurred. Had she imagined it? Was it some kind of hallucination brought on by stress or lack of sleep? But the image had been so vivid, so real, that she couldn't dismiss it as mere fantasy. Over the following days, the phenomenon repeated itself with increasing frequency. Mika discovered that by concentrating on a person's presence, their breathing, their movements, the subtle sounds they made, she could slip into their visual perspective. She saw through her mother's eyes as she cooked dinner, watching steam rise from the pot of miso soup. She experienced her father's view of the evening news, the flickering television screen, filled with images she had only heard described before. At first, this newfound ability filled Mika with wonder and excitement. She finally understood what colors truly looked like, beyond the abstract descriptions people had given her all her life. Red wasn't just warm, it was vibrant and alive, pulsing with energy. Blue wasn't merely cool, it was deep and vast, like an endless ocean of possibility. She spent hours practicing, borrowing the eyes of everyone around her, building a mental catalog of the visual world she had been denied for so long. Her best friend Yuki noticed the change in her immediately. "You seem different lately," she observed during lunch one day. "More confident, maybe. And you keep tilting your head in strange ways, like you're looking at things." Mika wanted desperately to share her secret, but feared Yuki would think she had lost her mind. How could she explain that she could see through other people's eyes? It sounded impossible, even to her, and she was living it. Instead, she simply smiled and changed the subject, asking Yuki about the upcoming school festival. As weeks passed, Mika grew more adept at controlling her ability. She learned that physical proximity made the connection stronger, and emotional bonds seemed to enhance the clarity of the borrowed vision. She could maintain the link for several minutes at a time, though it left her exhausted afterward. As if she had run a marathon, she began to use her power strategically, borrowing her teacher's eyes during visual presentations, or using her classmates' vision to navigate unfamiliar environments. However, with greater control came disturbing discoveries. Not everyone saw the world the same way. When she looked through the eyes of her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Tanaka, colors seemed faded and dim, the world wrapped in a melancholic gray haze. Through the eyes of a stressed businessman on the subway, everything appeared sharp and harsh, with edges that seemed to cut into the periphery of vision. Some people's vision was clouded by tears she couldn't feel, while others saw the world through a filter of anger that tinted everything red. One evening, while practicing her ability in the local park, Mika made a connection that would change everything. She had been sitting on a bench, listening to the sounds of children playing and dogs barking, when she sensed someone approaching. The footsteps were odd, too light to be an adult, but moving with a rhythm that didn't match a child's gait. Curious, she reached out with her ability, trying to borrow the stranger's eyes. The moment she made the connection, Mika wished she hadn't. The world through these eyes was wrong in every possible way. The familiar park was there, but overlaid with something else. Shadows that moved independently of their sources, writhing and twisting like living things. The trees, which she knew should be green and brown, appeared black and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. But most terrifying were the creatures she saw, moving among the unseeing people. They were everywhere, translucent beings that seemed to exist between dimensions, their forms constantly shifting and changing. Some crawled along the ground on too many legs, while others floated through the air like jellyfish made of smoke and nightmares. They moved through people as if they weren't there, occasionally pausing to wrap themselves around someone's head or chest. When they did, the person would shudder slightly, their expression becoming momentarily vacant before returning to normal. Mika tried to break the connection, but found she couldn't. The stranger's eyes held her trapped, forcing her to watch as one of the creatures noticed her observation. It turned, if something without a discernible front or back could turn. and focused on her with an attention that felt like ice water in her veins. More of them began to notice, abandoning their oblivious human hosts to drift toward the bench where she sat. "You can see us," a voice whispered. It came from no human throat. It was like the sound of wind through empty buildings, carrying the echo of abandoned places. "How interesting. It has been so long since one of your kind could see." Panic gave Mika the strength to finally tear herself away from the borrowed vision. She gasped, her own darkness almost comforting after what she had witnessed. Her hands shook as she gripped her cane, and she could feel cold sweat running down her back. The presence she had connected with was gone, as if it had never been there at all. But the damage was done. Even in her blindness, Mika could sense them now. The creatures she had seen through those inhuman eyes. They were all around her, had always been around her, invisible to normal human sight. She could hear them sometimes, a whisper just below the threshold of normal perception, like static between radio stations. She fled the park, her cane tapping frantically against the pavement as she hurried home. But home offered no sanctuary. When she borrowed her mother's eyes at dinner, she could see the faint outlines of the creatures, like after images burned into her borrowed vision. They were fainter through normal human eyes, barely visible. But now that she knew what to look for, she couldn't unsee them. That night, Mika lay awake in her bed, afraid to use her ability, but equally afraid not to. Were the creatures watching her? Could they find her, even without her borrowed sight? She had so many questions, and no one to turn to for answers. Who or what had she connected with in the park? Why could that being see the creatures so clearly? And most importantly, what did they want with her? The next day at school, Mika tried to act normal, but her concentration was shattered. Every time she accidentally slipped into someone else's vision, she searched for signs of the creatures. They were there, always at the edges, barely visible, but undeniably present. She noticed that they seemed drawn to certain people more than others. Those who appeared tired, depressed, or angry often had more of the beings hovering around them. During history class, she borrowed her teacher, Mr. Sato's eyes, and noticed something disturbing. One of the creatures was wrapped around the head of a student named Kenji, who had been acting strangely for weeks. Through Mr. Sato's eyes, she could barely see it, but it was there, a translucent mass of shifting darkness that seemed to be whispering into Kenji's ear. As she watched, Kenji's expression grew more vacant, his pen stopping mid-sentence as he stared at nothing. "Miss Harada," Mr. Sato's voice cut through her concentration. "Are you paying attention?" Mika snapped back to her own perspective, her face flushing with embarrassment. "Yes, sir, I'm sorry." But she wasn't sorry. She was terrified. These creatures were doing something to people, influencing them in ways she didn't understand, and now they knew she could see them. That afternoon, Yuki confronted her. "Something's wrong," her friend said bluntly. "You've been jumpy and distracted all day. You keep flinching at nothing. What's going on?" Mika wanted to tell her everything, but how could she explain without sounding insane? I've been having nightmares," she said finally, which wasn't entirely a lie. Really vivid ones. Yuki's expression softened. Do you want to talk about them? Before Mika could respond, she felt it. The same presence from the park. It was nearby, watching. Without thinking, she reached out with her ability, connecting to its vision. The world exploded into nightmare. The school hallway was transformed into a corridor of horror. The walls pulsing with veins of darkness. The floor covered in a carpet of writhing shadows. The other students were there, but each was surrounded by multiple creatures, some feeding off their energy, others whispering constantly into their ears. And they were all looking at her. "Found you," the voice whispered, and this time it was clearer, more defined. "Did you think you could hide? You who can see? You who can bridge the gap between worlds?" Mika tried to pull away, but the connection held firm. Through the being's eyes, she saw herself for the first time. Not just her physical form, but something more. There was a light within her, a brilliant silver thread that connected her to every person around her. The threads were what allowed her to borrow their vision, she realized. But there was something else, something the creatures seemed to fear and desire in equal measure. "What are you?" she managed to ask, her mental voice trembling. "We are the Watchers," the being replied. "We have existed alongside your kind since the beginning, feeding on the negative emotions you produce so abundantly. Fear, anger, sadness, despair, these are our sustenance. Most humans cannot see us, which makes our work easier. But you are different." The vision shifted, showing Mika images of the past, other humans throughout history who had possessed similar abilities. She saw ancient shamans and modern psychics, all sharing the same silver light. But in each case, the light had eventually dimmed, consumed by darkness. "They all tried to fight us," the Watcher explained. "They all failed. But you could be different. You could help us." "Never," Mika said firmly, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. The Watcher's amusement rippled through the connection. "You say that now, but what will you do when we turn our full attention to those you love? Your parents? Your friend Yuki? How long can you protect them when you can barely protect yourself?" The vision released abruptly, leaving Mika gasping in the school hallway. Yuki was holding her shoulders, her face creased with worry. "Mika, are you okay? You just froze and started shaking." Mika's mind raced. The Watchers knew who she was, knew about her ability. They could hurt the people she cared about. But there had been something else in that vision, something the Watcher hadn't meant to show her. The silver light within her. It had hurt the creature when it got too close. The Watchers fed on negative emotions, but her light seemed to be made of something else entirely. "Yuki," she said suddenly, gripping her friend's hands, "I need to tell you something. It's going to sound crazy, but I need you to believe me." And so, in the empty hallway after school, Mika told her best friend everything. About her ability to see through others' eyes, about the Watchers, about the threat they posed. To her surprise and relief, Yuki didn't laugh or call her crazy. Instead, her friend listened intently, occasionally asking questions. "So these things, they're everywhere?" Yuki asked when Mika finished. "Yes, they feed on negative emotions, making them stronger. That's why depressed or angry people have more of them around." "Can I see them?" Mika hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe if I tried to share my vision with you somehow?" It was a risk, but Yuki was already involved now. The Watchers knew about her. Mika took her friend's hands and concentrated, trying to reverse her usual process. Instead of borrowing vision, she tried to lend it, pushing her awareness into Yuki's eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Yuki gasped, her grip tightening painfully. "Oh my God," she whispered. They're everywhere." Through their connected vision, they could both see the Watchers now. Dozens of them in the hallway alone, drifting through walls and floors, clustering around certain areas. But something else was visible too. Threads of silver light connecting various people, though none as bright as Mika's. "Look," Yuki said, her mental voice awed. "Other people have the light too, just dimmer. What if everyone has the potential? What if the Watchers keep it suppressed?" It was a revelation. The Watchers fed on negative emotions, but positive ones, love, hope, joy, seemed to strengthen the silver light. They had been parasites all along, keeping humanity in a state of perpetual emotional darkness to maintain their food supply. "We have to do something," Mika said. "We have to help people see." But even as she spoke, she knew it wouldn't be easy. The Watchers had existed for millennia, had systems in place to maintain their secrecy, and now they knew about her, would be watching her every move. That night, Mika lay in bed, her mind racing with possibilities and plans. She could feel the Watchers around her house, pressing against the walls, trying to find a way in. But something held them back. The love of her parents, she realized, created a kind of barrier they couldn't easily cross. She thought about the ancient shamans and psychics she had seen in the vision. They had fought alone and failed. But what if she didn't fight alone? What if she could teach others to see, to strengthen their own inner light? It would be dangerous, but the alternative, letting the Watchers continue their parasitic existence, was unthinkable. Tomorrow, she decided, she would begin. She would start with Yuki, teaching her to recognize and strengthen her own silver thread. Then, they would carefully, quietly help others. It would be slow work, dangerous work, but necessary. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Mika's last thought was a realization that brought both fear and hope. She had wanted so desperately to see the world, but perhaps being blind had been a gift. It had forced her to develop other senses, other ways of perceiving. And now, when she could finally see, she saw not just the surface of things, but the truth beneath. The Watchers thought her ability was a curse to be exploited or destroyed. But Mika knew better. It was a gift, one that could free humanity from an invisible prison. they didn't even know existed. The war for human consciousness had begun, and it started with a blind girl who could see more clearly than anyone else in the world. you